it's there. Well, you mentioned some numbers earlier, obviously, and some charities, but there are key charities. The one the patron for is called Soul Sisters Empowering People. We support men and women that have suffered domestic violence. But there is support. There absolutely, definitely is support. But I'm talking, Eddie, I talk a lot about energy and how we can deal with things internally within ourselves. But I think the key, the absolute key, is to know, and this is what I didn't do then, and I was too frightened to, but I'm a different person now. But at the time, just say to yourself, I know I'm right, and I know this was wrong. I know I'm right, and I know this was wrong.
Do you know how many subjects I deal with this in? People go at women, and it's women, it's not men. Let me just be honest with you. It's women in my field. The women going to the GP knowing that something isn't right, and the GP kind of, male or female, going, well, look, that's what normally happens. But you know in your body that something isn't right. Women, this is what happened to me. And as a policewoman, and it strikes me that people who do that type of job want to do good things, are quite strong in whatever field. And if you can't come forward, how does a 19-year-old university student who's had Rohypnol put in her drink, how does she come forward? And how does she have the confidence to come forward when the very person that it's like V? I don't know if you ever watched the old series called V, where you're talking to the person and after a while you can see the mask slip, and that person is exactly the same sort of person who took advantage of you.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I know it's phenomenally difficult, but the reason I didn't come forward are very personal to me, and that's another thing to remember. It's very personal. I had very little, ironically, doing a job like policing, I had very little self-worth. I'd come from an abusive childhood, so my benchmark was rock bottom low. So I didn't have that capacity within me. And I just hope and pray that aren't if anyone
is that person still in the force? Is that person still in the force?
No, retired.
So, effectively, in your world, will that person have a case to answer, or have you put it in a place in your mind where you have to get on with the rest of your life?
Well, there were two cases. In fact, there were more, but the specific case I'm thinking of are two. And yes to the last. And actually, the person I saw, and they actually apologised to me. I saw them after I left the job and after they'd retired, and they apologised, which was a moment of just incredible. It was all fluke, just chance. No such thing. I saw him. And he apologised, and he meant it. He was very remorseful, and that was fortunate for me in a way. But yeah, it's very personal. It's very personal why we don't come forward. Yeah. But like I said, find the right person. Find the person that you feel will really serve you. It might not even be the obvious person. It might not be the person that's there with you sharing your house, but find someone to share it with. And know in yourself that it's wrong, and that you have a right to do something about that if you choose. But this case today is just...
Do me a favour, Joe, do me a favour. I like you to believe that nothing is by accident. When I asked who my trends guest is today, and they said I knew there was a reason. You link up with too many of these stories. Please, when you get off this phone, talk to someone. Chill out, take a moment. When the news comes through tomorrow, make sure I can hear what their story and me asking you the questions has done. I am so sorry, and I am so appreciative on behalf of all the other women who are listening, all the other people who are listening, that you bothered.
Because the major companies have all agreed to try to sort of better support customers through the cost of living crisis, and there are steps they have up their sleeves. They can move you to a cheaper package sort of internally, perhaps. They have payment plans they could look at, and there are also these things called social tariffs. So if you receive particular benefits, you might be eligible for a discount there. So yeah, definitely worth checking what you can do in this situation.
Emily Seymour from Rich and Andrew Wilson. Thank you both. That's it for today. It's our phone in tomorrow. Call you and yours, and we're asking, what are you spending your money on this year? The Bank of England's optimistic about the UK economy. It depends a lot on retail sales. Christmas spending was higher than expected, and more flights were sold in January than before the pandemic. What is your attitude to spending this year? That's our question. Might you buy, I don't know, clothes, meals out, a house, a holiday, a car even? Or are you too broke or too cautious for any of that? What are you spending your money on this year? Here's our email address. You can contact us right now. You and yours at bbc.co.uk. Leave us your phone number.
Ian Yours was produced by Tara Holmes. The studio managers were Sue Stone Street and Philip Hallowell. Just before 1 o'clock, time for checking the weather, and in the studio is Chris Forbes. Hi, Chris.
Hi, Holly. And mixed fortunes really this afternoon. The northwest of the UK stays quite cloudy. There will, though, be a lot of dry weather. England and Wales having the best of the day's sunshine, meanwhile, because we're underneath an area of high pressure. So for England and Wales, lots of sunny skies with just a few exceptions. In Cumbria, we do have a bit more cloud here. The early morning cloud has cleared away from most of Wales to give sunny skies, but some fog patches are working into the Thames estuary. They're affecting parts of Kent as well. So there will be one or two areas that keep the rather grey skies, but for the bulk of the England-Wales area, it's just dry with lots and lots of sunshine and light winds. And in that combination of sunny skies and light winds, temperatures widely around 8 or 9 degrees Celsius today. So that's a degree or so above average for this time of the year. For Northern Ireland, we're looking at a lot of cloud here. There'll be occasional brighter spells, notable southwesterly breeze picking up through the afternoon, but it is mild, temperatures reaching a high of 10 degrees this afternoon. And in Scotland too, we've also got quite a lot of cloud across northern and western areas. In fact, the cloud's thick enough to give an odd bit of drizzle into the Hebrides and for Shetland as well. But otherwise, the emphasis is on dry weather. The best of any breaks in the cloud will be across the northeast of Scotland today, with some sunshine here. Temperatures mild, about 10 degrees as well for Scotland. Now overnight tonight, we'll keep the largely clear skies across England and Wales, so it's going to be another cold night with a widespread frost. Temperatures typically 0 to -2. However, the lowest temperatures will probably get down to about -6 in the countryside, and as well as that, we're looking at a few patches of mist and fog. Now I think across East Anglia and South East England, the fog might actually turn out to be quite widespread and quite dense as well. For Northern Ireland and Scotland, it's not so cold here. Temperatures 5 to 7 degrees on account of the thick cloud and a bit of drizzle we'll have. Tomorrow a bit more cloud working from Scotland and Northern Ireland into Northern England, but otherwise some sunshine.
Thanks, Chris. Now let's hear from Matthew Side.
On BBC Radio 4.
I thought, oh, this could be kind of a wild goose chase, but I could never have imagined how far this was going to go.
See the world differently.
Prodigies are mastering a field, a domain that has already been invented. They're not inventing anything new.
Life-shaping ideas.
Healthy skepticism is about asking difficult questions, not assuming what you're told is true.
The new series of Sideways with me, Matthew Side, on Radio 4 and BBC Sounds. Starts on Wednesday afternoon at 4.
On 92 to 95 FM, 198 Longwave on digital radio and BBC Sounds. This is BBC Radio 4.
1 o'clock.
Hello and welcome to the World at One with me, Sarah Montague. A rescue operation is underway in Turkey and Syria, where more than 1,000 people are known to have died after a massive earthquake.
What happened very quickly. 1 minute you're fine, you're sound asleep, the next minute you could be dead. No one thought they would get out alive, no one.
We'll get the latest from Turkey and Syria and speak with those involved in the rescue operation. Ambulance workers and nurses are striking in England.
What do we want? Fair pay! When do we want it? Now! What do we want? Fair pay! When do we want it? Now! What do we want?
Industrial action was called off in Wales while they consider a new pay offer. We speak to the health minister there about moving negotiations forward. And the writer Salman Rushdie has given his first interview since he was stabbed last year.
I have feeling in my thumb and index finger and in the bottom half of the palm.
Can you type?
Not very well because of the lack of feeling in the fingertips.
His friend Alan Yentob joins us live to talk about Sir Salman's recovery and his new book. The BBC News is read by Charles Cowan.
A second earthquake has struck southern Turkey and northern Syria just hours after a powerful quake overnight leveled thousands of buildings. At least 1,500 people have died, but the figure continues to rise as rescue workers search the rubble. Experts say tremors from the initial quake were felt as far away as Greenland. Here's our Middle East correspondent Tom Bateman.
Footage captured the collapse of a tower block in the Turkish city of Diyarbakir. People screamed and rescue workers watched, unable to act, as the building was brought down by an aftershock almost as powerful as the initial quake. Experts warn of further tremors across southern Turkey and northern Syria. The quake is on a scale unmatched in decades, straddling a region already racked by war, poverty and a refugee crisis, while a winter storm and power outages are hampering the crucial early hours of the rescue operation. The number of confirmed casualties is rising by the hour, and Turkish officials say at least 1,700 buildings are known to have collapsed, a number set to grow significantly. In many places, people are having to use their bare hands rather than machinery to search for survivors, listening out for voices or the sounds of people breathing. In opposition-held parts of northern Syria, already cut off from many aid convoys, rescuers say the situation is bigger than any organisation can deal with and have appealed for urgent international help.
President Erdogan of Turkey said that 45 countries had offered assistance. The earthquake occurred in a region of instability called the East Anatolian Fault. Seismologists have long recognised that the fault is very dangerous, although there's not been any significant activity there for more than 100 years. Our science correspondent, Palab Ghosh, reports.
This was a big earthquake. It registered 7.8 in magnitude, classified as major on the official scale. The centre was relatively shallow, at around 18 kilometres below ground, and so able to cause serious damage to buildings on the surface. But it's not just the power of the tremor that causes devastation. This incident occurred in the early hours of the morning, when people were inside and sleeping. The sturdiness of the buildings is also a factor, and this was a region where there hadn't been a major earthquake for more than 100 years, or any warning signs, so the level of preparedness would be less than for a region which was more used to dealing with regular tremors.
A sentencing hearing has heard how the former Metropolitan Police officer David Carrick carried out a systematic catalogue of violent and brutal sexual offences. David Carrick has admitted 85 offences, including dozens of rapes. Helena Wilkinson reports from Southwark Crown Court.
From the glass dock, Carrick looked down as the prosecutor began to tell the court of his appalling crimes. Sitting a few metres away were some of his victims. Opening the case, Tom Little KC said of the 85 offences Carrick admitted to, 71 were of serious sexual offending. Mr. Little said the reality was it did not matter who the victim was. He would rape them, sexually abuse, assault them, and or humiliate them. The prosecutor added that some of Carrick's victims were either appreciably older or younger than him, adding they were all in their own ways vulnerable. The court heard that Carrick frequently relied on his charm to beguile his victims. Later, the court will hear victim personal statements written by some of Carrick's victims about the impact of his crimes on them. The judge is expected to sentence Carrick tomorrow.
Thousands of nurses and ambulance staff have walked out in England in what the NHS says is the biggest round of strikes over pay and conditions in the health service. Further industrial action will take place later this week. Our health correspondent, Sophie Hutchinson, reports.
The first wave of this week's strikes is now well underway. The Royal College of Nursing has described picket lines at 73 sites as really well attended and the mood determined. Around a third of NHS trusts in England, mainly hospitals, have braced themselves for this industrial action by nurses from the RCN and ambulance staff from GMB and Unite unions. Emergency cover has been provided, but it's likely that thousands of appointments will have been cancelled. Pat Cullen, the RCN's General Secretary, said nurses would continue to strike until the government got back to the negotiating table, but ministers have ruled that out.
Most primary and secondary schools in Inverclyde and Shetland are shut today after teachers belonging to the Educational Institute of Scotland union walked out in a dispute over pay. It's the final strike in 16 days of action across Scotland. More walkouts are planned for later this month. Police in Surrey are investigating the deaths of the head teacher of the prestigious Epsom College, her husband and their 7-year-old daughter. It's understood they're treating the situation as a crime scene and no one else is said to be involved. The boarding school is open today. Our correspondent Robin Brent is there.
There are very few signs from the outside of what occurred inside the grounds of Epsom College. The flag on top of the church spire is flying at half-mast. I've seen a few pupils in uniform walking around. Emma Patterson was only a few months into the job here. Police say they were called to the school in the early hours of Sunday morning. Mrs. Patterson, her husband George, and their 7-year-old daughter Letty were found in the grounds of the school. I understand police are treating it as a crime scene. In a statement, the chairman of the governors said our immediate thoughts and condolences are with Emma's family, friends and loved ones. He went on to describe the head as a wonderful teacher and a delightful person.
Robin Brent reporting.
Charles, thanks very much. The images and sounds coming from Turkey and Syria and flooding social media are distressing and paint a picture of a catastrophic situation, and one that spreads over a vast area. These sirens are in Hama in Syria. The pictures show the rubble of buildings with rescuers pulling out people, some dead, some alive. The 4 a.m. quake, which measured 7.8 on the Richter scale, was centred just north of Gaziantep in Turkey. And it was followed not just by aftershocks, but by another quake of magnitude 7.5 at about 1 o'clock local time. More than 300 miles to the north of Hama, a reporter for Turkish television was reporting live from the streets of Malatya as the second quake struck. Turkey's President Erdogan said it was the largest disaster since 1939.
According to the latest figures, 912 citizens lost their lives. 5,385 of our citizens have been injured. The number of people rescued from the rubble reached 2,470. The number of buildings found to be collapsed is 2,818. We do not know how far the number of dead and injured will rise, as debris removal works continue in many buildings in the quake zone. Our hope is that we will recover from this disaster with the least loss of life.
What we do know already is that those numbers will dramatically increase, with the final death toll likely to be in the thousands. Now, before we hear more from Turkey and Syria, let's get an overview of what they're dealing with. Stephen Hicks is a seismologist at University College London. Stephen, good afternoon.
Good afternoon, Sarah.
First of all, given where these earthquakes are, what sort of area are we talking about as being affected?
Well, when we talk about earthquakes, we often talk about an epicenter, like a sort of specific point on the surface. But for these large earthquakes, this earthquake, it rips along a very long portion of fault. So imagine tearing a piece of paper and that crack propagating through the paper. Today's earthquakes ruptured a fault 400 kilometers long, so mainly to the northeast of the region, close to the Turkey-Syria border. And so that would have then caused the damage to be extended over a huge area, so sort of 400 kilometers to the northeast, and then surrounded that as well by 100 kilometers or so. So this is huge. When I woke up early this morning and saw this alert, I just thought this is the worst case scenario of a very shallow earthquake beneath a very populated area, which just doesn't sadly have the buildings to withstand such strong shaking.
Okay, and then the magnitude when we're talking about 7.8, 7.5, the second one?
Yeah, so when we talk about magnitudes of that level, we on average around the world we might have a few of those per year, but most of those will be located beneath unpopulated areas or beneath the oceans. But it's not the magnitude so much, it's also the depth of the earthquake. It's occurred at a depth of about 10 kilometers. So any sort of magnitude 7+ earthquake at that depth beneath the populated area is going to cause devastation. So it's the shaking intensity which is just as important as the magnitude.
Okay. And people were talking about aftershocks, and then there was what I think is described as effectively another earthquake. How do you know how do they know when it's over?
Yeah, it's a good question, and it must be. I've never lived in a seismically active zone like this, and it must be mentally very tough to live in this, knowing that there are earthquakes coming. Now, when we talk about earthquakes, generally we sort of take an average that the largest aftershock after a large earthquake should be about 1 magnitude unit less, so about magnitude 6.7 in this case. We had a magnitude 6.7 11 minutes after the original main shock early this morning. But then, yeah, we've had this magnitude 7.6 just an hour or so ago. And so that's already showing that this earthquake is behaving differently to your average earthquake. And so we can always say that in all likelihood, compared to many other earthquakes, we're going to see it behave like this, but we can never completely rule out this sort of more unusual behavior.
Stephen Hicks, thank you very much. Russell Pegram's a geography teacher. He was originally from Southend-on-Sea, but he's visiting his wife Ezra's family in Turkey. They were in Gaziantep at the epicenter, as we were just saying, when the earthquake struck in the early hours of this morning.
It was just horrific. I mean, I've personally been a geography teacher for over 20 years, probably taught earthquakes every year, but nothing could prepare me for what happened in a real one at 7.7 magnitude on the Richter scale. Everyone just woke up from their sleep and just froze in shock. You just can't believe it's happening. The whole building was just shaking violently from side to side, things falling off, falling down. Then instinct just kicks in, and I just grabbed my wife's arm and got the rest of the family. We just ran. That's it. Didn't care what you're carrying, what you're wearing. Just got the car keys and the wallet and ran out the building as fast as we could.
You mentioned the rest of the family. How many are you?
There was 6 people in the home at the time. Her extended family here in Gaziantep.
Do you have children with you?
No children. Just a pet cat. Yeah.
I mean, you're sounding in quite good spirits. What state was your flat in when you left it?
Yeah, things have been knocked off the walls and things. It was a violent earthquake. After being gone back up quickly in the morning, a lot of paint's come off the walls and there's cracks here and there. So far, the response from the Turkish authorities has been nothing more than heroic. From the moment it started, the response was so quick.
So what happened when you left? You say you grabbed your car keys and your wallet, and what, you just wanted to get your family away, I imagine?
Yeah, that's right. Once we're outside, the next problem started. You know, Turkey is in the grip of winter right now, so just run out without any shoes and you realise, there's snow on the floor. It would have been better if it was snowing. It was just this really cold rain where it's 1 degree Celsius. Then other families started to trickle out from the apartment building complex. Neighbours got together. It was teamwork. If there was an old lady or an old man who'd come down and you had space in your car, everyone was just getting blankets and sharing them, whatever they could do. People were freezing, absolutely freezing cold, because they hadn't come out prepared. Everyone had just run out. And it's the same situation right now. It's snowing right now in Gaziantep. There's people who are lucky enough to have cars. There's other people who have lit fires on the side of the streets just to keep warm, because no one's going back in. We've actually just had another aftershock of 7.5. Just had a massive earthquake 10 minutes before you called.
Right. And so what, literally you're parked on the side of the road and the whole ground is shaking?
Yeah, that's right. You could see the lampposts, the trees, and the windows kind of moving with the seismic waves as they just came through. We've seen collapsed buildings. The famous castle of Gaziantep has been destroyed on each side. That's collapsed.
I mean, presumably you had petrol or diesel, your car had fuel to get away?
Yeah, I was lucky, I guess. I think I filled up just a day or two before. The gas stations have been a chaos in the morning. When it comes to resources and pressures, there's
national response, such as Turkey setting up command and control and coordination. You also need the request to the UN to come in. Normally that's no more than a phone call within minutes of the event, coming to either the Under-Secretary General, as I was.
That's a sitting A&E for 36 hours knows why we're on this picket line today. We're fighting ourselves, but for our family, our friends, and for everybody. I'd say to the Prime Minister, you clapped for us, now act for us. Come to the table and talk to us.
Television interview last week, Rishi Sunak, the Prime Minister, said, look, one of the reasons why, he said he would love to give nurses more money, but he said one of the reasons why it's not possible is because that money would essentially have to come out of other NHS services. At a time when the health service has been under pressure, can you see the logic of that argument?
I can, but I don't believe it. You know, he managed to find the money to give the barristers a 15% pay rise. When they need to, they can find the money and
accepted.
Well, we've been working in social partnership with our trade union colleagues for weeks and weeks now to try and see if we could get a settlement. Obviously, it's up to the members in terms of whether they want to accept this, but the good news is that this will be put to the members of the vast majority of the health unions now in Wales, and what we have seen is a suspension of action in Wales, which has not happened in England, and I think it just goes to prove that if you sit down and you listen and you respond, then you can actually get some movement.
Okay, so you're obviously hopeful that it will be accepted.
Well, I don't think we're complacent, and we continue to negotiate with those trade unions who have suspended the strike action.
Now, when we spoke to you before, you said that you couldn't afford to offer any more, that the settlement from Westminster didn't allow you to, because you effectively needed the money in Wales for other things. What has changed?
So we haven't found any more money. What we've done is we've slowed down spending in some areas for this year's financial package. We've raided our reserves, which is obviously a bit of a risk for us. And then when it comes to the consolidated offer, which was very much a red line for us,